Good morning. Well, I got called up in 1940. I went to the Jetting Lines in Brecon. I was there for about 9 months, and then in August 41, they sent me out to Cairo. The 1st Battalion of the Welsh Regiment got knocked about in Crete, and what was left of them came back to Cairo. So they sent a contingent of us borderers out to make them up. We were there for about a couple of months, and then we got sent up. We called it up the blue. This is up the desert, and we fought our way up to a place called Benghazi. I expect you've heard it on the news recently. We had our Christmas dinner, and then in about the first week in January 42, we heard that the Germans had come out there. Of course, when we fought our way up as the Italians, and they gave up by the million. Still, I got up as far as Benghazi. We had our Christmas dinner, and in about the first week in January, Sergeant Major Cogbill said to me, "Corporal's road," he said, "take a section up the road and see what's going on." So I took 10 men up the road, and we'd gone about 300 or 400 yards, and there was a great big Tiger tank coming down the road, a German tank, and an officer standing up in the front. And he looked at us, pointed his machine gun at us, and in perfect English he said, "Come on, boys," he said, "drop your guns," he said, "for you the war's over." So I was in the bag. But eventually, I expect you've read in the books that Rommel looped the loop and went down as far as Cairo. He caught the old Welsh regiment. We were all prisoners of war. So they took us up, eventually we took us up to Tripoli, and they put us in empty cargo boats going back to Italy, Naples. And we arrived in Naples, and we were there for a couple of weeks at a transit camp. And then they took us down to Brindisi, down in the heel of Italy, at a little village called Capua. Stella, it was Campo 65. Oh, it was terrible down there. The food was shocking. Little tiny piece of bread and a bit of cheese every morning, and a bucket of soup in the evening, watery soup. Give you an idea what the soup was like. If they had broad beans, they just chopped them up as they were, pods and all. Just imagine soup made out of stuff like that. Anyway, we were there for about 7, 8, 9 months. And then one day they put us on a train, and they said they were taking us up to a place called Taruna, just outside Rome. There was an incident, I must tell you. On the train, we made little stoves out of tins and things. So the boys were brewing a cup of tea, and I was on the rack having a sleep, and someone shouted, "Brew up, Taffy." They all called me Taffy, of course. So I went down, my boots open, the train went around the corner, the old lot went down inside my boot. I had a blister that big, it was touching the ground either side. Anyway, I eventually got up to Rome, and they took us, I think it was about 3 kilometers march to the place in Taruna. But there was some British medics there. They cut all the skin off and wrapped my foot. I don't know if anybody heard of it, is wrap my foot in aquaflavin, and I haven't got a scar or anything on my foot. Marvellous. Still, we were there for about a couple of months, and one day the Italian interpreter came round and asked was there anybody there with engineering experience. I asked why. He said they're short of labour, he said, in the motor industry up in Milan. I thought it was a good idea, get out and get some food. Anyway, he put us on a train, about a couple of hundred of us on a train, travelled overnight, pulled in the station the following morning. We thought it was Milan, and all of a sudden we heard roast, roast. I said, that's Italian, that's German. We were in the Brenner Pass, and they was handing us over to the Germans. The Germans then put 40 of us in. I expect you've seen the Jews in cattle trucks. They put us in cattle trucks, 40 in a truck, I was in that truck for about 4 or 5 days. Oh, by the way, don't forget, the only clothes we had in those days was in the desert. All you wore was, they called it KD, just a shirt and shorts. That's all we had. Anyway, we were in the truck. There was no toilet. We had the runs with the food. There was no toilet. We used one corner to use as a toilet. To be quite honest, all we had was our tail of our shirt just to wipe your bottom with. We must have been, and of course I had a beard. We must have been in a shocking state. Eventually, after 4 or 5 days in this truck, we pulled up at a station. We seen Lambsdorff. We didn't know where it was, of course. It turned out that it was Bassaleg in Poland, Stalag B in Poland. I expect you read about it. They got us up there. Of course, by this time they gave us razors, cleaned us up, covered in lice and fleas. They took all our union and gave us clean uniform. But in Germany, everybody below the rank of sergeant had to work. There was something like about 130,000 prisoners of war in Poland. They worked on farms, coal mines, railways, all sorts. They sent a few hundred of us and told us that we were going to work in IG Farben, chemical industry. We didn't know where it was, of course. Anyway, cattle trucks again, and we got off and we was marching down the road to our digs, and we saw all these fellas in pajamas behind barbed wire digging trenches. I said to one of the guys, like, who are they? Juden, he said. I said, pardon? He said, Jews. Just like I'm saying now, Jews, like as always should have known. It took us about, all of a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks before we realized that it was Auschwitz. And we didn't realize it when they told us, the Poles down in the works, told us that they gassed and burnt them. Don't be daft, it couldn't do things like that. Yes, they do, he said. He said, you wait, he said, if the wind's in your direction, you can smell it all. And believe me, we did. If the wind was in your direction, and we smelled it, it was terrible. You couldn't eat your own food. Anyway, I worked in the works. We worked there from Monday to Saturday, 12 hours a day, from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening. I worked on a plant that made synthetic petrol from coal. And they had karmas, they call them karmas. They were like big cylinders about 60 foot high, and they filled it with filters, clay filters. So the petrol used to go in and filter, and every now and then we used to go up on top and change them over while they cleaned them out. And one particular day, Corporal Reynolds was there. The German who was in charge of us, used to call him Meister Beaver. Beaver said to Reynolds, go up and change them over. And Reynolds said, I can't, he says, I haven't got the right equipment. It's cold and icy, and he refused to go up. I think what was main trouble, I think he didn't like heights, he would have fallen off. Anyway, he wouldn't go up. Unknown to us, Beaver sent for a guard, and unfortunately it was under officer that came there. That's a sergeant in our army. He came there and he pulled his Luger out and he said to Reynolds, I can't, he said, and he shot him there and then, killed him. You should have seen me, I went up like a flipping monkey. Still, that was an incident. Don't get me wrong, the Germans, basic Germans, weren't like that. That was just an odd incident. But the Red Cross came there, they played hell about it. And then the Feldwebel, that's the commander in charge of the Germans, says, oh, don't worry, he said, he's gone to the Russian front. And we've since learned that he got killed on the Russian front, which we laughed about, of course. But we'd had trouble with him before. But there was all sorts of incidents at the works. There was once, occasionally, we used to get Red Cross parcels in. And if we had Red Cross parcels, you wouldn't eat the German rubbish. So I had a piece of sausage one morning, and I took it to work, and I gave it to one of these Jews. These Jews did all the menial tasks, like digging trenches, laying cables, and all such things like that. And he was, if you could see how they treated the Jews, you wouldn't believe it. They walked about, they shuttled, they didn't have the strength to walk. They were in a terrible state. I seen Kramer, Joseph Kramer, one day. That was the commandant of the Germans. Come round there and shot a couple because they got in his way. Oh, how they didn't trick over the traces, I'll never know. Anyway, I give this bit of sausage to one of these Jews. He said his name was Joseph. And then a couple of days after, he gave me that ring. He said he made it out of a pipe. Sure. I just stuck it on my finger, and it's been there ever since. Interesting, isn't it?
So you've made it there?
Yeah, and then about 2 or 3 weeks after that, he disappeared, Joseph. So I asked one of his colleagues where he was. Oh, he said, gas chamber kaput. So they knew exactly where they were going. Why they didn't kick over the traces, I'll never know. If it had been us, we'd have played hell. I mean, for instance, when we got there, we found out it was making petrol for the army. We refused to work there. So our Sergeant Major Cogbill went in there. Cowan went in there to see the Feldwebel and said, we're not going to work here, he said. This is war effort. We're not allowed to. Geneva Conventions won't allow us to. And the German commander took his Luger out and put it on the table. That's my Geneva Conventions, he said. So we didn't have any option but to work. There were several incidents that went on there. For instance, we tried to, on the days off, we tried to, we had basketball and all sorts. And of course there was a lot of footballers amongst us. I was a professional footballer, a goalkeeper. Thank you. So we persuaded the Germans one day, between us and the Jews camp was a couple of big fields. So we persuaded the Germans one day to let us out in the field to play football. We only had an old rag ball. Like. Anyway, we were out there on a Sunday afternoon playing. We didn't work on a Sunday. We were playing football, and the Red Cross came there and found out that we played football. The next time they came, they brought 4 lots of shirts, English, Scotch, Welsh and Irish, boots, shorts, jerseys, all the lot. So we sorted ourselves out into 4 teams, and every Sunday afternoon we used to go out playing football. I'm the goalkeeper. That's the Welsh football team. The Poles used to come into camp doing repairs and cleaning and all, and we used to give them a packet of cigarettes because cigarettes was currency. I used to take cigarettes down into works and get some white bread and eggs off them. I had that after and eggs once along my gators and the flipping guards. When he walked in the camp, he went in and searched you, and he found the eggs. He smashed them, the devil. He said, "Oh, you're my lever," and he smashed them. Eggs, my friend. Yeah, and then he put me in prison for 3 days because I battered them. Bread and water for 3 days. Still, if you look on that photograph, you'll see most of them got a little white Prince of Wales feathers there. Well, I got someone to draw the Prince of Wales feathers on a piece of cloth, and I embroidered it out of old socks.
You embroidered it?
I did, yeah. Yeah, my mother was a tailoress, so I was used to using a needle at home. Where I got the needle from, I haven't a clue, but they did have a needle anyway.
They are socks. So they are socks.
Yeah. We also had a fellow with us called Wally Martin, and he used to put plays on. He was a small-time producer with the BBC, and he used to put plays on. So one day he put Sweeney Todd on. If you look on there, Ron Jones, a police sergeant. And that's a photograph of the 20 that was in my hut. That's me there, second from the left, second from the right. There was another day, I wrote home and told my wife that cigarettes was currency. I used to swap them for all sorts. If I got a pack of cigarettes, the Germans would do anything for a pack of cigarettes. Anyway, I was down in the works one day, and when Paul came to me, he had a little box in his hand, and when he opened it, it was a Rolex Oyster watch. You know what they are worth, don't you? He wanted some cigarettes. I forget, but I gave him 200 or 300 perhaps cigarettes. I don't know how many now. So I had a Rolex Oyster watch, and I had it on my wrist. Now, when we was on this march, I'll tell you about the death march after. A German officer spotted it, and he wanted it. He kept on pestering me. In fairness, he didn't take it. I thought he would, but he didn't take it. He even said to me one day, "You're not going to survive this march anyway, you better give it to me." But a few days after that, he came there with a sack of bread. I couldn't get the watch off quick enough, could I? I was starving. I'll tell you about the death march. We obtained a wireless. In those days, it was all little valves and all sorts. So someone got this wireless down in the works, and we all took a little part of it back to the camp, and someone put it together. So we had a wireless. Oh, the Gestapo came there quite half a dozen times. They knew we had a wireless, but they never found it. What Sergeant Major Cockbill did with it, I don't know. But he kept it, so he used to get the news every night and come on and tell us what was going on. So we knew about the Second Front, and we knew also that the Russians were coming in. As you know, Holocaust is on the 27th of January when they marked in and released the Jews in Auschwitz. On the first week in January, the Germans walked into our camp. We could hear them fighting up the road. We thought, going to get released here. Anyway, about the first or second week in January, the German guards walked in the camp. Pick up what gear you carry, we're going to march you out. Now, before I start telling you about the death march, the temperature out there was worse they'd had for about 50 years. It was 15 and 20 degrees below. It was really cold. And all we had was tunics. We didn't have any gaitcoats or anything. So we started this march. I had a little haversack on my back with a change of underclothes in there. Thank you. And I think we walked through the Carpathian Mountains, down through Czechoslovakia, Bohemia, Saxony, Bavaria, and down into Regensburg in Austria. I was on the march for about 17 weeks. No food, no drinks, nothing. If you wanted a drink, you just scooped up some snow and drank it. But the Germans used to put us in barns at night time. Fellas just couldn't take it. When we left Auschwitz at about 250 hours, when we got to Regensburg, there must have been 150. Men just died on the side of the road, just dropped down and died. And the Germans just stick them in the snow and leave them there. I presume they died, I don't know. But eventually we got to Regensburg. Now, we had no food at all. We used to eat what the animals ate. I remember kicking a pig out the way once and pinching the potatoes he was eating. I lost, when I left Auschwitz, I must have been about 13 stone. When I eventually, Yanks picked us up in Regensburg, I was 7 stone. Believe me, we were in a tech of a state. I'd lost my boots. My boots fell apart. A lot of us did, same thing. I had sacks wrapped around my feet. Well, I just didn't walk, I stumbled. We were in a shocking state, believe me. But the Yanks picked us up now, and another thing we were covered in lice, fleas and lice. So the Yanks took us to a delousing centre and deloused us to start with. Then they took our clothes, burnt them, I came home dressed as a Yankee recruit, a Yankee soldier. Believe me, their clothes are beautiful, better than ours. Anyway, they took us eventually to what I would say was a rest centre. I was there for about a fortnight, and then they put us on a Red Cross train and brought us to Le Havre in France, where there was a fleet of planes. They picked us up and flew us home. I landed at Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire in a shocking state. But they had telegrams all made out there. Arrived in England, see you soon. So my wife then knew that I was on my way home, because she hadn't heard from me for about 6 months, didn't know whether I was alive or dead. Just the same when I got captured. She didn't hear for about 6 months. She had a letter from the war to say I was missing, and presumed if he didn't hear within 6 months, I was dead. Anyway, she eventually had a letter from the war to say I was alive. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lord Haw Haw. Ever heard of him? He was a man, an Irishman, employed in Germany, and he used to give out at night time anybody that had been captured. And they heard my name one night, but anyway, the War Office told her I was alive. This was in, I think it was about May, June, when she finally found out that I was alive. Anyway, when I got home now, I arrived in Newport station, and I had kicked back, of course, and I was in a bit of a state. I was in a shocking state. If you'd have seen me then, you wouldn't have given me a couple of weeks to live. I was in a terrible state. Anyway, taxi driver in Newport, where you going, mate? I said, out to Bassaleg. Jump in, and he talked me out to Bassaleg. Now, in those days, there weren't many houses available, so an old lady in our village had split her house in two. We had the downstairs, she had the up. So I used the back entrance. So I walked up the steps and turned the corner, and who should come out of the door but Gladys. Believe me, what a sight. But my whole family were there, of course. But to tell you more about my life at home, wasn't very pleasant. I was covered in boils. I used to get nightmares. We still had a couple of unions with fellows, and we all suffered the same thing. I used to get the boils I had for quite a couple of years. But I knew the village doctor, and he rang me up one day, "You come over the surgery, Ron." I went over there, and he gave me a little bottle of tiny little brown pills. There wasn't a label on the bottle. And he laughed when he said it. Take 14 the first day, then 12, 10 until you take them all. I did, and I've never had a pimple since, let alone a boil. Whatever they were, I haven't a clue. I didn't ask. But they cured my boils. But my nightmares and nerves, went on for years. It must have been about 4 or 5 years before I said I was back to a normal man. But the firm that should have got me out to start with, when I came home, my father was a blacksmith there, and a personnel manager sent to him one day, "Are you Ron his own?" "Yes." "Would he like to come out?" I expect my father, I expect he would. So he got me out about 7 months actually before I would give out my number. But they'd give me a light job then for a couple of years until I was back to normal. I also had, I went to a grammar school. I had a letter from the War Office to say there was a place for me at the Pontypridd Educational Centre to be a teacher. But of course my firm had got me out, didn't they? So I couldn't do that, could I? I couldn't let my firm down. I had a good job, I mean, okay. Does anybody ask any questions?
Who wants to start with the questions? They've all got a question to ask you. They've written it down, so they just...
They're thinking about it, I expect, are they?
Go on, who wants to start us off? God, Mr. Jones has talked loads. There's bound to be something that you want to ask him after speaking about his experience.
I'm 96, and I'm still here, and as fit as a fiddle. I'm not exactly as fit as I was young, but I'm still fit. I still don't get any trouble. I'm all right. But it's thanks to my wife. When I came home, my wife was fantastic. Gladys, if I wouldn't be the man I am now, but I'm in for glad. She used to nurse me, and she fed me. I don't know if anybody knows what Sanatogen is, but you can buy it in tablet and liquid form today. But in those days, it was like green powder. Ooh, it was terrible, but she made me have it.
Can somebody start off with a question?
How did you like keep your spirits up, like doing the voice?
I'm a bit deaf.
How did you like keep your spirits up to like motivate yourself?
How did you keep your spirits up? How did you keep yourself motivated?
Oh, that used to puzzle the Germans. Even when we were desperate and in these bands at night time, someone would start singing. And they couldn't understand the Germans. They used to look at us and flute them out. They couldn't sing. Oh, there was an incident on that match I didn't tell you about. One morning, someone said, there's a stew here. So we found some old tins and all that. I had an old tin of soup, and it tasted lovely. Particularly when you were starving. But when we left the farm was playing hell. He lost a dog. So whether it was dog stew or not, I'm not going to say. But it certainly tasted all right.
Next question, come on guys. Because once Mr. Jones goes from you, you'll be gutted if you haven't asked the question that you wanted to ask.
But don't be afraid if you want to know anything. There's loads of things that I could tell you about, but
I've got one, Mr. Jones.
I don't forget. I forget now.
Even though you were at the camp with the Jews, you were treated differently. How did that make you feel? Did you feel as if you could have done anything?
Terrible. Humiliated. When we were in that train, the humiliation, honestly, you wouldn't believe how you felt. Terrible.
So knowing I think in the One Show documentary that you were on, you said about that you worked alongside the Jews in the factory.
Yes, we did.
How did you feel about that, knowing that they got treated
terrible.
differently?
The way they treated the Jews, you just wouldn't believe it. Oh, they also had each gang of Jews had a capo with them. A fellow with a band, and he used to say capo on it. I think they were Polish political prisoners. And they used to hit the Jews about, beat them. I've seen them actually die in front of me. Terrible. You wouldn't believe how they treated the Jews. They must have hated their guts, honestly. You wouldn't believe it.
So was there any time where you felt as if you wanted to intervene to try and...
Well, yes. So when Kramer came... Oh, you've heard of Irma Gracie? She got hung at Nuremberg with Kramer.
Right.
I tell you what she did one day. When we seen her, we didn't know who it was at the time, but we soon learned who it was. We had cesspools in the camp, and they used to come in, horse and cart in those days, of course, with a big tank on the back of a cart, and they used to pump all our sewage into the tank. Then they used to go to a field at the back of us, knock the bung out, and drop it back and forth on in the field outside. And one day, a lorry came up there with some young Jewish girls. We presume they were Jewish girls. And they had potatoes in a bit of a bag around their waist, and what we used to call a little maddock. And they walked through it barefoot, dropping a potato. And then that woman Gracie was shouting at him, and we said learned who it was. But she got hung at Nuremberg, the trials at Nuremberg. Of course, all we were into this thing, we hadn't seen women for years. We were arguing the women, of course we were cheering and shouting. Well, you know what it's like when you see young, beautiful women walking about. They were lovely, the Jewish girls, all around about 16, 17.
How old were you?
I have to speak up more.
How old were you? How old were you when you were there?
I got called up when I was 23, So I must have been about 26, 27, 28, because I was a prisoner of war for 3.5 years. When I got home, I was nearly 29, and of course in those days, there was another thing, in those days, women didn't have babies like they do today, when they're in their 30s. Gladys wanted a baby, of course, didn't she? And I couldn't perform. I was in too much of a state. She even went to the local doctor and said about it, and, oh, give him time, he'll be all right. So eventually we had a son. Yeah, you would be surprised how I was. I was in a terrible state. And nerves, oh, I tell you what, one day, in those days, women used to embroider, and Gladys had started a tablecloth. And she saw that little embroidery that I'd done of the Pennsylvania feathers. So she threw it on my lap one day and she said, do that. And I've done dozens since. I used to raffle them in the church. I've given them as birthday gifts. I've done dozens of them, but it made me sit down. And I would say it cured my nerves. There was another thing that I used to suffer with. Nerves are a funny thing. I used to work nights. Gladys was in bed, of course. And I wouldn't walk up the stairs frontways. I'd walk up backwards. Nerves. I was always afraid there was someone putting their hand on my shoulder. You'd be amazed what nerves does to you. If I was at the wash hand basin in the bathroom, I was like this, thinking there was someone behind me all the time. Shocking thing, nerves, shocking. I'm still here now. 96, still driving.
Did you experience any kind of maltreatment from the hands of the Germans? Like
I didn't, no.
So under the convention they weren't allowed to
I would say that 90% of the guards that was with us were either old men or they'd been injured in the front and they couldn't work. Some had slings, some had patches on their eyes, elbows.
So they were different set of guards
Yeah.
to what was in the Jewish
There was
barracks.
another thing we used to suffer with our teeth. Because of malnutrition, your teeth used to go loose and chip. So the Feldwebel, a German officer, used to allow a guard to take us into a Polish dentist in Katowice once a week. And this week, I went there with 3 of us, and he must have lived there because he took us to his home and his wife made us a meal. So, you know, the guards on their own were all right. We didn't have any trouble. Give them a pack of cigarettes and they would let you out, I think.
Right, I'm going to go round now, because I know we've got the questions. You can go first.
What regiment were you in?
And
What regiment was you in?
1st Battalion, the Welsh Regiment.
Has the experience made you a stronger person?
What she did?
Has your experience made you a stronger person?
I wouldn't know, really. I'm just me. Yes, I suppose it did in a sense. I think I'm a better person. I mean, I tolerate all sorts, and I'm still working. 96, I'm still busy. When I retired, they gave me retirement in 1980. A couple of weeks after that, there was a knock on the front door, and my nephew was there. He's a state agent. Mum told me just retired, Uncle Ron. Yeah, come and do a few odd jobs for me, and I'm still an odd job man. I still go in the office once or twice a week. Usually there's something to do.
Do you think you'd be a different person today if that hadn't happened to you?
Pardon?
Do you think you'd be a different person today if it hadn't have happened to you?
Yeah. Do you think I think you just answered that, didn't you? Do you think you're a better person?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
You think
Yes.
you are a
It's
different
made me understand people's problems. I don't get irritated. Never hear me raise my voice. I suppose it has, because I wasn't like it before. Now I've got plenty of patience. I didn't have when I was young. Yes, maybe I am.
And Mr. Jones wasn't even supposed to go, was you? Tell him the story about what happened, because you weren't supposed to go to the war, were you? You weren't supposed to be signed up.
No, I wasn't.
Explain.
All this I told you, I wasn't supposed to go in the first place. I had a reserved occupation. I was a qualified wire drawer in the steelworks. But I was in bed working nights, and Gladys came in. There's an envelope from the War Office here. I opened it with my call-up papers. I couldn't believe it, because we used to sign a form every 6 months to say that you were qualified, whatever you were, in a reserved occupation. I used to do all sorts for aircraft and all. Anyway, I went down to the works, and cut a long story short, after a lot of searching, they found out that some silly typist had put my form in the incoming mail instead of the outgoing mail. No record of me at the labour exchange. I got called up. Whilst I was in Brecon, I had 3 interviews with the CO because my firm was wanting me back. But he made excuses, and within 6 months I was out abroad. Another thing that happened, I was extremely fit man as a young fella. I belonged to what we call the Oxford Boys, and I was a member of the cycling team from Newport. So I was extremely fit. So I excelled in the gym. And up in Brecon, we had a beautiful gym up there. And Sergeant Major Reardon, who was in charge, retired. And someone said, oh, don't worry, Ron Jones, he's a boy, Corporal Jones, he's a boy, he'll take over. So they went to look for me. Unfortunately, I was in London. What happened, the different regiments trained and drilled different ways. So they thought, when we were all together out in the war zone, we all should train the same. So they sent 2 NCOs up to the Scotch Guards. I was up there for about a month, and they taught us how to drill, and then we come back and taught our regiment. That was the idea. But of course, while I was up there, and then because they couldn't find me, they picked out a fella, a butcher's son from Cardiff, who was also pretty good, put him in charge. He stayed in Brecon all throughout the war. So if I'd have been there, I wouldn't have had all this experience.
Did you get a chance to become friends with many of the Jews?
Did you have a chance to become friends with many of the Jews?
Pardon?
Did you have chance when you was there to become friends with many of the Jews when you were
No,
there?
yes, well, in a sense, yes. But we had to be very careful. You weren't allowed to talk to the Jews. If you spoke to a Jew, you used to get beaten. The capital would take the hell out of him. Sticks and rubber truncheons, all sorts. But we did on the quiet. We did. And we used to give them food. Another thing, they used to bring soup for us for lunch, rubbishy soup. So we used to give it to the Jews. We didn't like it. And if we had food parcels, of course, we didn't want it anyway. So we did help the Jews as much as we could. But it was very difficult. I think the Jews' life in the works was about a month. And at the end of that, up the gas chamber. From where we were in a camp, we used to see a lorry full of Jews going up. We used to say, poor buggers, they're going up to the gas chamber. And another thing, when we were out in the field playing football, we were nearer to the Jews' camp, and you could see sometimes like a scaffold with Jews hanging, bodies hanging on it. Another thing we used to hear was their orchestra. They had an orchestra going there. But we were about, I would say, 2 big football fields away. Not Birkenau. Birkenau was about where the trains came in. They were about 3 or 4 kilometres away. They were. Anybody else?
Did you play football when you came up?
Yeah, we did. We played football every Sunday afternoon when it was fine. You couldn't play in the winter, mind the winters out there. After October, believe me, it was cold. They did give us gloves to, if you caught hold of anything, like iron or anything, without gloves, they took the skin off. The frost was so bad out there that the wire mesh around the camp used to be one solid block of ice. That's how cold it was. And of course we didn't have any greatcoats. I did write home and told my wife how cold it was, and she sent me they used to send parcels. Out of 8 parcels she sent me, I had 3. But one of them had a sweater in it. You can see with a footballer, that's when I used the sweater.
Yeah. Did you play football when you came back home? Did you carry on playing football?
No, I lost it when the Yanks picked us up. They stripped me, bathed me, and I came home as a Yankee soldier. Dressed as a Yankee soldier. I've even got the 2 blankets, knife, fork and spoon, in the house now that they gave me. They rigged me out like a raw recruit. Well, a lot of us, of course.
How did your son react when he found out about you?
How did your son react to your story about
Oh, now?
you?
Oh, he's all right now. There was something my son, he showed. I'll be quite honest with you. I passed for the grammar school. But my father was a blacksmith, and he believed in trades. So my 2 sisters and 2 brothers were given trades. I was taken from school when I was 14 to, all right, his idea was trades, not professions. So it seemed that I was very clever at school. You ever watch Countdown on the television? I'll bet I'll get the numbers right more often than not, even at 96. But so we all had trades, and he sorted me out for he had to pay an endowment, but I finished up a qualified wire drawer.
How was your son reacted to the story?
Leighton was wonderful. He was only 10 and a half, and the school. When he was 7, our local village school was a poor little school, but we had a school. I don't know if we ever heard of it, Rougemont.
Yeah.
Well, they persuaded us to send him to Rougemont. So he went there when he was 7, and then Mrs. Evans, who was in charge of Rougemont in those days, phoned me up one day and said, Leighton's a typical example to send to a boarding school. And she gave me 6 schools. I picked out 3, Christ College Brecon, the Monmouthshire Haberdasher School, and the Hereford Cathedral School. And what did he do? He go past the 3 of them, didn't he? What do we do now? Anyway, he had to go around for all the exams. And he said he liked the headmaster at Monmouth School, so I sent him to Monmouth. Today, there's a coach from Newport going back and forth, but in those days, of course, it was boarding. So Leighton, by the time he was 11, went to a school. But by the time he was 14, he had about 7 O-levels. When he was 15, he had 13 O-levels and 2 A-levels. And then he was off, when he was 16, he was offered a place in Cambridge. But the career master at Monmouth School said, if you want to take economics, the best place is Liverpool. So he went to Liverpool University without even an interview. Then he worked for a firm, Marconi, and of course Marconi went bust. So 3 Italian brothers took Leighton, bought the part of the firm that he was in, and made him head director, company secretary. One of the family he was. You know, Italians are family-wise. He was one of the family. He's retired now, of course. I see him often. He's got a flat up in Unstanton, but he's down with me more than he is in Unstanton. Looks after me. Comes there for a good meal, I think, because I'm
Because you had questions, then close your question.
It's been answered.
It's been answered, Paige.
And mine's been answered.
Huh?
How did you adjust when you come home from Germany?
How did you adjust when you returned from Germany?
So back home,
Yeah, how did you adjust?
it took me, I would say, 4 to 5 years to get back to normal. I was in such a state, nerves. Oh, you wouldn't believe. You wouldn't have given me a couple of years to live when I got home. I was around just over 7 stone from a 13 stone man to start with. I was all bag of nerves, twitching, couldn't sit still. I was in a shocking state. But when my firm got me out, they gave me a light job. So eventually, but it must have been all of 5 years at least before I would say I was a normal man.
Adam, Sophie, what was your question?
What do you get different medals for?
These?
Yeah.
Well, the round one is everybody that belonged to the National Services had one of those. The crosses, the stars, are the different theatre of war you fought in. That was the African, that was the German, and that one's a special badge to give to a prisoner of war. That's the veterans badge, of course. That one is a life membership of the British Legion. I'm not only a member of the British Legion, but I've been selling poppies at Tesco's in Newport for the last 20 years. I go down there for a fortnight. Sometimes I sit there all day because we can't get young people to help us. That one is official poppy seller.
So when you see a poppy next time, you've got to buy one because you've got to think of Mr. Jones when you buy it.
There was another thing I'm famous for. You know Newport County football?
Yeah.
The first time I went down to see Newport County was on the crossbar on my father's bike. I was 7, and I've been a supporter ever since. They've actually made me a life member now, vice president.
And they're actually in the football league now, so you can get some
Well, I was a
matches down
footballer.
there.
My claim to fame, I played in goal for Wales 7 times during the war.
Yeah. All counts. Counts.
So I go quite to history.
And just to finish off then, because you've been really good today and attend today, it was absolutely amazing. This is Mr. Lloyd, our headmaster.
How do you do?
Nice to meet you. Thanks
Mrs.
for coming.
Reynolds, our assistant head.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting for you to know, because I know some of you might want to do this when you hear about this, but if you tell them about your book.
Yes, a fellow, I don't know if you know him, Doug Lovejoy. He's a sports writer. Oh, about 18 months ago, he says, what about writing a book, Ron? I said, I can't remember enough. Anyway, he kept on until he's written a book about me, and it's being published on Wednesday evening at the British Legion Hall in Newport. It's called The Auschwitz Goalkeeper. It's quite a hard book, quite a big one. Very interesting. I've read it.
Yeah.
They sent me a copy, the Goalkeeper Press.
Yeah.
Sent me a copy a couple of weeks ago.
So I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I'm actually going to go down to the Legion on that Wednesday night, have a drink with Mr. Jones and get him to sign me a copy. So if anybody wants me to get you a copy signed then, God, give me a 15 quid by Wednesday.
It's $14.99, I know that.
Actually, £16 because you can have £1 for your copy appeal then as well.
If you're there, I'll sign it for you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Pupils are really appreciated if you come in. And we've just got something small for you to thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Right, there's teas and coffee. Teas, coffee, and if you wait, no, you've got to go now, you have. Send you on your way. No, definitely, I'll make you a cup. You have a sit down, look.
Thank you.
Right, if you lot want to help yourselves, because I'm not making you lot coffee, please don't forget.